The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O'Potsner, and I have a great show for you today, I believe. Not because of me, because I have a super guest. We all know that our country, the United States of America, is based upon the experiment in democracy. And that experiment has lasted for almost 2.5 centuries, based upon our Constitution of the United States of America. And everyone here who watches this show knows that we are in a very much of a crisis time right now. And in order to preserve our democracy, we need people to step forward and be willing to serve as elected officials at the grassroots level up to the top levels, Congress in Washington, D.C. And I have a guest today who has shown great love for our country and has volunteered his time for years. And he'll tell you a little bit about his story when we get on to talking to him. And he's been elected official. He worked hard for the recent election of Roberto Alves. And it's important that we all step forward and do our thing to protect our country at the grassroots level. Let me introduce to you today Farley Santos, a great example of a true American spirit. Farley, welcome aboard.
Hey, Bobby, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be on.
Farley, introduce yourself in terms of what positions you hold right now, right at this various point in time, and then we'll go back to your history. Sure. In our state, in our city.
Yeah. So currently I serve as the state representative for the 109th district, which encompasses northwest part of Danbury. If anyone's familiar with the Great Plains, Stadley Rough area, that's where I represent and the neighborhoods around there. I previously served on the Danbury City Council representing the 4th Ward for nearly 4 years. And before being appointed to the city council and then winning a few elections, I served on the Danbury Board of Education for nearly 2 years. And that passion for serving came about when my daughter was born. We'll talk a little bit more about why I was driven to serve, but just to be able to give back to this community, a community that really adopted my family and made us a part of it. Is very important to me. It's something that my parents ingrained in me, and I'm really proud of serving in those capacities.
I didn't realize you were on the Board of Education. That's where my heart and soul is because, as you may know, I spent 15 years on the Boards of Education in the town where I grew up, Shelton, Connecticut.
Yep.
And then when I moved to Richfield, Connecticut, where I've been for now 26, 27 years, I was on the Board of Education in Richfield for 6 years. Very tough board to be on. I loved every minute of it. Yeah, I think because you can help people and help kids. And so I'm glad to see that you had that background. Farley, tell me about your background. Where were you born?
Sure. I was born in Brazil, and we immigrated to this country when I was 7 years old. My story is not any different than most of the immigrant stories of folks who came to Danbury. But before then, when I was 3 months old, my mother couldn't raise me. And she had 10 sisters and 2 brothers, and she needed to have one of them help out. I'm one of 3 sons that she has. She had a troubled life. And so at 3 months old, my aunt and uncle took me in, and that was the very best thing that could ever happen to me. They were mom and dad to me. And when they hit a very tough financial situation in Brazil after an economic downturn, they lost everything and they decided to start all over again here in the United States. And that's what brought me to Danbury. And we've been here ever since I was 7 years old.
Did you speak English when you came to the United States?
No. I was an ESL student for about 2 or 3 years at King Street and then Haystown Avenue School. We spoke no English at all. In fact, my parents really never were able to grasp the English language because they had to work so hard and never had time for any kind of schooling. And so they really never even learned how to speak the language. So at a very young age, I was the neighborhood translator. I was going to, at 8 years old, to the Social Security office, to the DMV, to Connecticut Light and Power back then, trying to help out the community that we were all growing up in, because I was really the only one that could speak English amongst several families.
From my board of ed experience, I know that ESL stands for English as a Second Language, correct?
That's right. Yep. And we call it now multi-language learners, right? MLL students.
Right. The thing is that I can understand why your parents or your relatives didn't speak English here, because as a 7-year-old child, it's easier for you to learn the English language, which probably wasn't easy anyway, but it's easier for you than if you came over as an older person. It's much harder to learn the language. The other thing I want to say to you is we're all immigrants. Yeah. I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but my grandfather was born, I always say Poland, but it was the borders changed so much you didn't know exactly where. I just say Eastern Europe. And my grandmother was born in South Africa, believe it or not. And I don't know how they met, but they met. Yep. But my point is that anyone who talks about immigrants who doesn't acknowledge that each and every one of us is an immigrant, well, they're wrong.
You're 100%
about that.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, and I think that if you look at the makeup of our city, right, it's so representative of that. But you're right. I mean, we all came from somewhere that wasn't here, right? The natives who are here are the only ones that have a claim to that. So, of course, and we need to also understand that the immigrant experience, perhaps not faced in your generation or another generation of your family, it was faced by someone back then, right? And America was built on the fact that we were a welcoming place for people to come, those who had troubled lives. And, my parents were an example of that. My mother was a school teacher in Brazil. My father was a beer distributor executive. And when they lost everything, they came to this country and worked really hard. My father was a janitor. My mother was a cook and a babysitter and whatever kind of work we could find, right? That story, like I mentioned in the beginning, is not unique. It repeats itself over and over again, no matter what generation people came from.
And, I did a show a couple of years ago with then Supreme Court Justice Khan, who was born in, was it Angola? I think it was Angola. I think she was born, which I think was a satellite of Portugal. I did her, and with also Patty Cruz. Nice. And the show was about, and now she went, when I did the show with Justice Khan, she had just gotten appointed to the Superior Court of Connecticut, which is the lowest level of judicial jurisdiction. Then she got appointed to the Appellate Court. Yep. Then she got appointed to the Supreme Court, and now she's a federal court judge. So, we're all important.
We are.
Tell me, you said you mentioned about your family, your children being an important influence in you and becoming an elected official. Tell me about that story.
Sure. And I think most parents will agree that when you have a child, your first child, your life changes a bit. Perhaps your perspective changes, right? And as a student in Danbury Public Schools, where I, went through all of our public schools, and I actually graduated from Henry Abbott Technical High School.
Hall of Fame. You remember the Hall of Fame there? I read that.
I was inducted this year. That was nice. It certainly wasn't because of my athletic abilities.
I've seen you run. Yes.
There you go. So my daughter changed my life. I realized that the public schools that she was going to be attending, because at the time I was an employee of Savings Bank of Danbury, where I worked for about 16 years. And they gave us the opportunity to serve within the communities, and I would be a mentor to students within the school district or teach junior achievement classes within the elementary schools. And I would notice that our public schools were not the same as when I went to school. When I learned English, it was one teacher to 2 or 3 students. And now we know that is not the case. It's dozens of students per every teacher. Very hard to learn in that environment, especially when you're learning a different language. But, seeing all the other issues that were happening, and they were just getting bigger and bigger. We're dealing with them now. But it's a culmination of not paying attention to education. And that was what sparked my interest in saying, you know what? These schools are going to be the schools that my daughter is going to go to. But it's not just about my daughter. It's about every single child that is going to Danbury Public Schools. How can we give them the best learning experience possible? And I, looked at my wife and I said, if not us, then who, right? So jump in. Let's be of help. I served on the Board of Ed for 2 years, like I mentioned, quickly realizing that a lot of the problems that were happening was because of a systematic underfunding of our public school system in Danbury. The Board of Ed would come up with a need, and the City Council would give them much less than that. That has now really been a detriment to our public education system. We've seen it over and over again, where now it's millions of dollars behind, and we can see what impact that has had in our public schools. And then also realizing that, the best investment we can make in our community is in education, because a better educated population is one that's going to be able to give back. They're the next doctors and lawyers and public servants. But the best opportunity at success is the best investment that we can make in our city.
Let me tie into that. I remember when I was on the Board of Ed, there was an expression we found, which was something like this. I don't have it verbatim. I think it was, if you think the cost of education is expensive, look at the cost of ignorance.
Yeah,
100%. And that's not the exact quote, but you spend, if you can, if kids need, for example, when I was on the Board of Ed, there was always an issue about, we spend too much money on special needs kids, for example. And that used to get my skin crawling. My wife's a retired special ed teacher. My daughter's a special ed teacher. And I was a big advocate, I thought, of those issues. And I would hear this, I'd say, wait a minute. Everyone has a right for a fair and appropriate education. They call it FAPE. And I resented that people would say those kinds of things, that it's not fair or whatever. But if you look at the big picture, the dollar you spend on the child, let's suppose the child has dyslexia, for example, and can't read well. If you spend that dollar or $2 or 10, whatever the number is going to be, for the child in 3rd and 4th grade, when that child can read well, let's say to the best of his or her ability in the senior year in high school, look at the money that it may have cost us to do that, but we saved a ton. And it's not just about money. So I think you'd probably agree with me on that concept.
100%.
But now that you're in the state legislature, and I've skipped over years in the city council, because as I told you before the show, our 28 and a half minutes goes really quickly. Yes. You're in the state legislature, and you have the ability to help municipalities with respect to funding. And you mentioned that the Danbury, I think, was like $3 million or something like that in the whole, if I'm right about the numbers from education. So tell me, your position is a state rep. How do you deal with education from there, and how can you help cities like Danbury and Richfield, every town?
Yeah, look, for me, it was going to Hartford and telling a different story, right? As a former undocumented immigrant, and like we talked about, as an immigrant myself, it was going to Hartford and sharing the Danbury experience, right? Understanding that we have over 30% of our students now in Danbury Public Schools that are MLL learners, right? Multilingual learners. And knowing that average compared to those districts that are like ours is about 15% higher than the next district. Really? We needed to go tell that story in Hartford. And I'm really proud of the first legislative session that I was a part of, working with our Democratic colleagues, State Senator Julie Kushner, who shares Richfield, State Representative Rahab Ali Brennan, and State Representative Bob Godfrey. We strongly advocated for a change in the education cost-sharing formula. Danbury will see millions of dollars more this year and next year because of that. We also had to fight for a $10 million extra for the Danbury Career Academy due to overpayment of the building itself. So going there and telling that story, explaining why Danbury needs a little more, right? Again, I just represent Danbury. Was part of what inspired me to run for this office. But then it's also understanding that education changes, right? It's not the same every year, really, but every 5 years, there is a drastic change in how you teach students, the kind of challenges that we're facing. Mental health is a big problem that needs to be addressed, right? And so I was really proud of this legislative session. We made record investments in school counselors and ensuring that we have the kind of mental health services in school that kids need, that for decades was really forgotten. So it's all encompassing. There's so many, it's multifaceted issues within the education system, but just being able to either start the conversations or deliver on promises that we made was really, it was a fulfilling, experience for me. And I'm looking forward to the next legislative session to be able to do more of that.
As you probably know, I'm a Duke Law graduate, so I'm a big Duke basketball fan. And yes. Coach Krzyzewski, Coach K, used to always say, everybody runs his or her own race. Everybody runs his or her own race. Every child learns differently. I'm a visual learner. I'm not sure how you. I'm a visual learner. When I go to court, I take my notes. When I was in college, I had a friend next to me who would not take one note in class and would just sit there and think. Yeah. I wouldn't think in class. I would just write all the notes down and then go after class. I would take my notes and go through it and highlight it. But sure, everyone learns differently, and you have to, as an educational system and as a state, you have to take that into account. When I was first on the Board of Ed, I was like 24 years old, 23 or 24 years old in Shelton, and there was a case called Sheff versus O'Neill.
Yes.
The Sheff, which was a case about making more equal educational experiences, because with all due respect, some inner cities have less money to deal with than Danbury or Richfield and Newtown, et cetera. That case is still sort of kicking around. I don't think it ever finally got, and that was in the late 70s, early 80s. And so we really need to face the issues, and we have to share. We all have to share.
Right.
You were heavily involved in the recent election of our new mayor.
Sure.
What was your role in the campaign?
So, listen, I didn't have an actual title, right? In fact, we would joke that I was a senior intern. I met Roberto Alves in 2017 when I decided to run for the Board of Ed. That's actually the same year that I met Joe Britton and Frank Salvatore and Will Love. And there was a group of us that kind of came together and said, let's work hard for our community because we care about it, right? Unbeknownst to me, Roberto Alves' father and mother had a catering company. They catered my wife and my wedding. And Roberto was actually at our wedding as one of the bartenders there. My wife actually connected that years later. But we've become very good friends. And quickly in 2017, I realized this guy had a special gift. He was smart. He was gregarious. He wasn't scared to face the challenges that were before us. He kind of led that group of folks who wanted to really work hard in that election cycle. We knocked thousands of doors in 2017, and it was a tough election, right? I was the only one that won out of all of us that kind of banded together, and I won a 4-year term on the Board of Ed. But then we did it again in 2019. When I was running for the city council, Joe Britton was running for the Board of Ed. Roberto was running for the city council, and Frank as well. And we all won that year. And, you know, we learned from the previous years, but we worked very hard. That was the key ingredient in every one of these elections. When he decided to run for mayor in 2021, I was all in, helped him as much as I could. And it was heartbreaking to lose by such a small margin that he did lose that election. And so this year there was something different, right? Different in what we were hearing from constituents and residents. People were fed up with the same old, giving excuses as opposed to solutions, right? And so he ran hard and he ran on the issues. And I'm really proud of the fact that Roberto became the very first Latino mayor of a city that is growing with Latinos, but he is so part of this community. He immigrated here when he was 5 years old. He was born in Portugal to a Brazilian mother and a Portuguese father. And so it's just awesome to see a mayor who can go into an event and speak English and understand that. He's a Danbury High School graduate. That's where he met his wife, and there's high school sweethearts. But then he's also able to speak in Spanish and in Portuguese to those residents who perhaps don't have a great grasp of the English language. So my role in that campaign was just to be a good friend and to work as hard as I would for any good friend of mine.
I will tell you, I actually met Roberto through you.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of fundraisers for him this time in the last election in Richfield.
Yes.
And I think it was a great idea to have outstanding other towns in the area be involved in various campaigns. And I met him through there. And then about recently, I was before the election, a couple months before the election, he hadn't seen me, except he actually saw me. If you watch the video that was the start of my show, the picture of Senator Murphy and me was taken.
He's in the background.
Right, he was in the background. And I saw him shortly thereafter. I won't mention any of the bakeries, but there's 2 Portuguese bakeries I go to for my popsicks, right? Getting my freshman pop. And he saw me one day and just said, "Hi, Bob." And I didn't really think he, knew who I was. I said, et cetera. And I tell you, I mean, this is the biggest compliment. I saw him at the debate given by the Chamber of Commerce shortly before the election. And I saw him the prior election. And in a positive way, the confidence, the knowledge of the facts were so much improved. Not that it was bad before, but you could just see he was working hard, even the years he wasn't in office after losing election by, I think, 100 or less votes, or the number of small votes, which tells the people watching your vote matters.
Of course.
And you got to vote. And if you say, well, I don't like either candidate, you're voting for the other for the candidate who's leading, I suppose, if you don't vote for your candidate. I say that for the Democratic election, the Republican election in 2024. I've heard people saying, well, I don't like either candidate. So what are you going to do? I'm not going to vote. Well, if you're not going to vote, it supports, in my opinion, the report supports the Republican candidate because he's got his base. But this is not about that election. The point is, you have a mayor now, and my office is in Danbury. I'm sitting in Danbury right now. I live in Richfield. I'm right across from City Hall. And you have a great mayor, and I hope people support you as a state rep. Joe Britton, who you've mentioned, his mom works in my office. Francesca Capilupo is the daughter of Susan Coco, my good friend in Richfield. I think she's in your office also.
She's brilliant. She's wonderful.
She's very, very good. We're all in this together. Farley, what is your position that you have in the city of Danbury right now?
Yeah. So, the election came and sort of went, and there was no real expectation of anything for me. I had a very good career in banking at Savings Bank of Danbury. I'd been there for 16 years. But the mayor asked me to serve, and it took a little thinking. And I, talking with my wife, she said, why not? So I am the Community Relations and Constituent Services Advisor to the mayor here. And my role is to deal with the issues that pop up every day, right? My road has got, water drainage issues, which we've been dealing with recently because of all the rain, right? Or I need help setting up a business, and I connect them to the economic development officer, who is George Sousa, an excellent hire for that position, someone who knows business really well. And he and I work closely with promoting our current businesses and bringing new businesses to Danbury. So my role here is community relations, getting in touch with the people, and then helping folks with services that they may need.
That's a very hard job that you've taken because, if I want to complain right now, I'm on my office in the corner of George Street and Deer Hill Avenue, and people drive the one wrong way up that street, which is dangerous. I know who to call now because you're the man. But everyone expects. I remember from the Board of Ed. Hey, I voted for you for the Board of Ed. I voted for you for the position. They expect people, the town, to do everything, and you can't. When trees fall down on 10 streets, you got to allocate your resources. But I will say this to you, knowing you as I do, you're a perfect fit for that job because you have. Well, you can hear from just if you haven't heard from Farley before. There's compassion, there's dedication, there's intelligence, and we work together, and I'll be interested to see what this administration, I was in the, by the way, Charter Vision Committee of Richfield, and when I did Charter Vision several years ago, I was a chairman of it between Board of Ed terms. I got the town to vote for a 4-year term for first selectman, and we passed that. And people said you'll never get that passed because in Richfield you have to go through a town meeting and then the referendum, whatever. I thought it was a terrible waste of money and effort to have a first selectman, in your case, a mayor, run every 2 years. We spent in Richfield $50,000 each campaign, which I thought was a waste of money. I bet you in your election, you probably spent $250,000, who knows, $250,000. I don't know what the number is.
Sure.
But I hope you can get that changed because to have someone run every 2 years, I think that's part of the problem we have in Congress in Washington, D.C., is everyone's always running.
Right.
But do you have some goals? What's your administration have in terms of goals and objectives, if I can ask, over the next 2 years together?
Absolutely. So look, some of the things that the mayor discussed during the election is how to make a government that is more transparent and more open to people. I think that's a goal right off from the gate there. We want people to understand that they can come to us, right? Prime example of that is a committee that the mayor announced earlier this week. It's the mayor's the mayor's community advisory committee, where we want input from people on 7 key subgroups that deal with housing, education, workforce development, right? Arts and cultures. We want people in the community who perhaps have an interest in one of these subcommittee areas or have experience or work in those areas to be part of that and tell us, here are the issues, investigate them, analyze them, and propose some changes that we can make, right? I think that brings a more inclusive government, one that understands that we are all part of this together. That's just one of the initiatives that the mayor has here. It's making sure that Danbury is thriving, making sure that we are a welcoming community for businesses, for families, and ensuring that residents get what they pay for, right? A lot of times we look at our taxes and we complain, but are you getting your money's worth? I can't speak highly enough of the mayor, not just because I work here at City Hall with him and for him, but because he's a good friend. And I've seen the kind of decisions that come across his desk just in these first 40 some days. And he's a perfect fit for that. He understands the life of a regular person here in Danbury, and he's going to make those decisions that benefit Danbury. He started that from day one. Decisions we make here don't benefit me, they benefit the city. And that kind of outlook is exciting to be a part of.
You mentioned George Sousa, who I know is actually his wife, Paul Boa Sousa, is one of my law partners.
Sure.
And I didn't know until 2 days ago
Yep.
that he was in the position he took, economic development. He's a great choice for that. I also know Peter Brazade, who's a fellow lawyer, who's a great guy. He's head of city council now, is that
He's
correct?
the council president.
Council president.
Yeah.
And I was actually went down to headquarters. I probably should, for transparency, indicate that I did contribute to the campaign of Roberto. So I should have said at the start of the show, just for transparency. But and I'm a good friend of Larry Riefberg's as well.
Yes.
We have about 2 minutes left in the show. And I wanted to give you an opportunity. First of all, if someone wants to read more about what you do, what the mayor's doing, is there a website they can go to? I'm sure there is, to read about what's going on in Danbury, the mayor's office, your office, whatever. How I want to complain about something.
Sure.
What email, and do it very slowly. People do it very fast usually. Very slow. Go ahead.
Got it. So yes, you can certainly check out the city's website at danbury-ct.gov. There's plenty of information on there. If you are on social media, we put a lot of that on there. You can look up Mayor Roberto Alves or City of Danbury on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's always information out there that we're putting up there. But if you have any questions or concerns, if there's anything that we can help with, you can reach out to me directly. My email is f.santos@danbury-ct.gov. We're here to help. We're here to serve. And it's a pleasure to do this for our community.
Farley, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show today. The work you're doing is great. You deserve the position you have, both the elected position you have in Hartford and the position you have in the city government. I know you'll do a wonderful job on it. Amy Berger-Giavallo is my state rep, and I'm sure you guys work together. In fact, you guys may commute together sometimes to save the gas money.
You know what? 10, 15 years, probably 16 years ago, I worked for Amy and her husband as a carpenter. I was a graduate from Avatech. So it's just amazing how such a small world.
Thank you, Farley Santos. This has been Bobo Potsner, another edition of The Bobby O Show. Enjoy yourself. Have a great day and weekend.
Thank you.